If you're thinking about buying the ShotScope Pro L1 laser rangefinder, then you're probably one of two people. Either you don't really want to spend £300 to £500 on a top-of-the-line laser rangefinder like the Bushnell Tor V5 Shift that I've got here, or you feel you want something better than the £100 rangefinders that you can get from Amazon, like this A4 GX2S. So in this video today, I'm going to try and help both groups of people decide whether the ShotScope Pro L1 is the right laser rangefinder for you. Before I dive into how I actually got on with the ShotScope out on the golf course, let's just quickly cover off the core basics of the Pro L1. Now, it has a 6x magnification, which is pretty standard across most laser rangefinders these days, and you can adjust the focus by moving the little eyepiece there on the front, again, which is pretty standard. ShotScope are saying that this is a water-resistant laser rangefinder, so you shouldn't really have to worry about it getting damaged if you do get caught in a shower out on the course. Now, it does come with a nice carry case in this blue and black design, and to be honest, it's pretty standard looking as well. If you take a look at the Bushnell carry case here, they pretty much look identical. So you've got the zip around the outside, and then you've got the nice and easy bungee latch as well that goes on the front, and you've got a carabiner as well that comes with it to clip onto your bag. Inside the unit here, underneath the eyepiece, you can see that there is a little compartment for the battery. Now that's a CR123 battery. ShotScope are saying that that's enough for around 5,800 uses, which is more than plenty for most golfers. In terms of the actual functionality, you can see here on the top, you've got a mode button, and that cycles through a scan mode as well as a flag lock mode with vibrate. And there's also a speed mode in there as well. We'll come on to that in a little bit. The unit also has a slope mode, which you can turn on and off from this little button on the side here. And there's an LED on the side letting you know whether or not the slope mode is turned on or off. And there's one other unique feature about this unit in that actually you can see here that there's this button on the side, and that changes the actual color of the display inside from red to black. So you've got two different options depending upon the light conditions. So aside from the dual color optics, which is quite a nice touch, I'd say that the Pro L comes with all of the features that you'd really expect it to for a golf laser rangefinder that costs £200. Before we actually compare the ShotScope with the premium and budget laser rangefinders directly, I did just want to cover off a couple of key things that I found with the ShotScope when I was using it out on the golf course. In terms of ease of use and the accuracy of the ShotScope out on the golf course, I've got no real complaints. I did find that it was just as accurate and was giving me similar yardages as the high-end Bushnell. I've got to say that it does take a little while sometimes to lock on the further out you are. Certainly from over 150 yards, you might just have to kind of wait on that flag lock mode just for a second or so until it locks on and gives you that vibrate. And if there are trees or other objects quite close behind the flag, then it can get a little bit confused sometimes. And I did find myself kind of double or sometimes even triple checking the yardages that I was getting to make sure that I was definitely getting the yardage to the flag and not to the trees behind it. Now that is something that you do find in common with the cheaper rangefinders, but not necessarily something you need to worry about when you get a more premium rangefinder like the Bushnell. Is it Bushnell? Bushnell? I suppose it's Bushnell. It's my dodgy pronunciation. The display is clear enough. I didn't have any real issues with that. And the option to change the color from red to black is a nice one because it does actually make a difference depending upon how bright or dark the conditions are out on the course. However, in saying that, I did find one thing a little bit annoying with that. It doesn't have any kind of memory with it. So it defaults to red on the unit. And that means after every shot, once the unit turns off, because it turns off after a couple of seconds to help save battery power, the next time you use it again, it'll be back to red. So if you want to use the black display, you're gonna have to change it every single time by pressing that little button on the side. Now, that doesn't sound like too much of a problem, but it will get frustrating. To turn slope mode on and off, you have got this button on the side, and it does feel a little bit cheap. It's a little bit stiff. Certainly if you haven't got any kind of nails, if you bite your fingers, then you're probably going to struggle maybe to turn that on and off a little bit. It's going to be a little bit of a pain in the backside. Another thing to note with this slope mode is that when it's turned off, the light comes on. I would have thought it would have been the other way around. It's a little bit weird for me. I suppose maybe they're thinking that actually, if you're using it in a competition when you have to be able to prove that the slope mode is off, then it's nice and easy. You can kind of point to the fact that the light is on, which means the slope mode is off. Personally, I think I probably would have put it the other way around. One other thing, the actual feel of the unit itself feels a little bit plasticky. It feels a little bit hollow. Apparently this is heavier than their previous laser rangefinder, but again, I kind of feel that I want a little bit more weight in it really to give it maybe just, you know, the illusion of quality perhaps. The actual buttons on the top are big enough there. If you compare it to the cheap Afer there for £100, then certainly the buttons are nicely positioned and they're easy enough to press and use. As I said, that button on the side does feel a little bit cheap, to be honest, for the slope mode. But the actual rubber on top feels all right. It could be a higher quality rubber, in my opinion. It could feel a little bit more grippy. It's a little bit boxy from the rear, but again, you're not really buying a laser rangefinder to look good. You're using it to measure the distance to the flag. Definitely, if I compare it to the Bushnell, then, you know, that does have a little bit more weight to it. Just all the materials just feel a little bit more premium, really. Certainly this, in comparison, the shot scope does feel a little bit more plasticky. So with all that in mind, does the shot scope justify its £200 price tag when compared to something like the Afer rangefinder, which you can get from Amazon for around £100? To be totally honest, I'm not entirely convinced it does. For anyone that's ever used one of these budget rangefinders before, and there's plenty out there on the market available to choose from, you probably have noticed that actually they all share one common trait. They all have a speed mode, which is entirely useless to golfers. Now, the reason why the speed mode is there is because the manufacturers of these budget laser rangefinders also make rangefinders for hunting, where actually they do need a speed mode. So to save on costs, they pretty much just use the same internal components and they label one for golf and another one for hunting. Now, I don't really have a problem for that when I'm spending £100 or less on a laser rangefinder. That's the reason why pretty much they are cheaper. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, the shot scope also has that speed mode. So that leads me to believe that in terms of the actual internal components of the shot scope, I kind of assume that they're probably something similar, or at least being made by the same kind of manufacturers that are making the more budget laser rangefinders. That theory is also backed up by the fact that the budget rangefinders usually show the yardages to 1 decimal place, which is exactly what the shot scope does as well. The more premium rangefinders don't bother giving you yardages to a decimal place because there's no golfer in the world that's actually good enough to really warrant knowing whether it's 0.1 or 0.2 of a yard difference. Perhaps the only saving graces with the shot scope is the fact that they do confirm that this one is water resistant, whereas I don't think I've really read that on any of the Amazon rangefinders, and also the fact that this has that dual color optics which you can choose and set if you want to. It is a nice feature, but as I said before, it's not perfect. With all that said, would I spend the extra £100 on the shot scope? Probably not at this moment in time. I've used plenty of these cheaper budget rangefinders before in the past, and I've never really had a problem with them. And they kind of work in exactly the same way, and they have the same kind of delay when waiting for the flag lock compared to more premium models. So personally, I'd probably save the money at the moment and get the more budget option. So what about the golfers who are happy to spend £200 on a laser rangefinder but aren't necessarily quite as comfortable spending the additional £150, £200 more on a premium laser rangefinder? Well, to be honest, I think when you put the two side by side in your hand, you can really feel that the Bushnell Shift V5 that I've got here is just a far more premium product. And when you use them out on the golf course, then this is the easier unit to use. It locks on a lot quicker and a lot faster, especially when you're at longer distances out on the course. Yes, the shot scope has the dual optics trick up its sleeve, which the Bushnell doesn't. But on the other hand, the Bushnell also has the magnet on the side, which you can easily clip onto the golf cart, as well as a very, very quick and easy system there on the side to turn on and off the slope mode. And it also has its own tricks up its sleeve with a red LED ring that lights up on the inside of the viewfinder when you lock onto the flag. So again, that helps kind of give it a little bit more of a premium feel as well. Does that mean that I'd recommend getting the Bushnell over the shot scope? Well, it all really depends upon your budget and how you value that money. If £400 is simply too much money to spend on a golf laser rangefinder, then no, I don't think necessarily that you are getting that much more with the Bushnell compared to the shot scope, or even compared to the more budget laser rangefinders as well. However, if you can justify that money, then you definitely get a far nicer experience using a premium product like the Bushnell. So that kind of puts the shot scope in a little bit of a difficult position. If you can get a good discount on it and get it for around the £150 mark, then that does make it a little bit more competitive as well. However, at £200, personally, I think I'd either go down to the cheaper ones or go up to the more expensive ones. it's kind of found itself in a little bit of a difficult position. Let me know down in the comments what you think. I hope you found this review helpful. And if you're still undecided which laser rangefinder is right for you, then why not check out my full comparison review of the top 3 budget laser rangefinders for under £100, or check out my total full review of the premium Bushnell Tor V5 Shift right here.